Welcome to Hassle-Free RE, the show where we share tips, tricks, and stories from the short-term rental industry and business alike. Hosted by Dave Menapace and Will Van Wickler. They'll help you navigate the exciting and ever-evolving world of short-term rentals. Whether you're a seasoned host or just starting out, they've got something just for you. In each episode, they'll bring you insider insights, expert advice, and real-life stories from hosts and industry professionals who have been through it all. They'll cover everything from maximizing your rental income and profits to creating unforgettable guest experiences and handling unexpected day-to-day challenges with ease. Are you ready to discover the secrets to running a successful short-term rental business without the hassle? Then let's get started. This is Hassle-Free RE.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of STR Success. I'm Dave Menapace, president of the 5-Star Co-host, co-founder of Launchpad Consulting, short-term rental consulting, and I help people buy homes, but you can just find everything on davemenapace.com. That's your easiest spot to go to. And I'm joined here by Mr. Will Van Wickler, New England's #1 short-term rental real estate agent. He's also a real estate investor and a pretty major influencer, especially within the Keller Williams community. Every single agent I talk to in KW is like, oh yeah, I know Will. So Will, what's up, man? How you doing?
Quite the intro. I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I'm super excited for today's episode. Before I introduce the topic, I want to give a quick tip to folks and how to make a little bit more money and how to have a certain framework and mindset when you're running a short-term rental. If you are an owner, regardless of if you have a co-host or property manager or you're self-managing, I think a lot of us can fall into the trap of having guests at the home be more of an inconvenience than anything else. Of course, we like having the income, and I think deep down, folks do enjoy providing a vacation to guests. But take stock, take inventory. If as you're getting your home ready, or if you're in the off season and you're starting to do your deep cleans, things like that, take stock on if it's feeling like an inconvenience to you. And the reason I say that is, as long as you're in the mental headspace of it being an inconvenience to you, you're never going to make as much money as you truly could. The better framework to have with it is, how can I convenience the guests? And also, how can I convenience my staff, my cleaners, my handymen, my pool techs, my hot tub folks? How can I make their lives more convenient? If you flip the mental framework and think about it from that lens, you are always going to attract more money into your business. So, just a little pro tip right there. Will, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before we, we introduce today's topic.
I think that's just a good way to look at life, right? If you look at
Yeah,
everything as I have to do this instead of I get to do this,
yeah,
energy's a big thing. I'll tell you that.
it is. It is. It is. So, before we totally go down a mindset rabbit hole, let's talk about something else that's real estate related. Today's topic is going to be honing in on exactly what you have to do if you want to sell your short term rental and how to maximize your income. Now, this is going to be more specifically catered to folks that are self managing, but we'll give some pro tips if you're working with a property manager as well. So, with that, Will, want me to just sort of take it from the top and we'll work backwards from there?
Let's roll.
I love it. We'll bring everyone back down to ground zero in just a minute. So, one of the most important things in life, not just buying and selling short-term rentals, but specific to buying and selling short-term rentals, is if you think that that is going to be a home that one day you're going to want to sell and you're going to want to advertise that it has a rental history of any kind, think about have the end in mind. So what do I mean by that? Well, talking about convenience once again, if you're ever thinking of selling your home as a short-term rental, it is a really good idea. And again, if you're self-managing, it is a really, really good idea to actually create your own Airbnb and VRBO and direct booking site, your own listings, specifically for that one singular property. Now, if you own several properties, sure, for 3 months, you're not going to get to enjoy the superhost status, but you'll be just fine. I promise. In the long run, you are going to have a lot more intellectual property that can convey with that home. Because one of the most inconvenient things as a buyer, a lot of buyers don't realize this, especially when they're new into short-term rental game. They think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This home has 80K in bookings for this year. All that means is that you're in for a major and rude awakening trying to actually keep those bookings. Because generally speaking, those bookings are on another Airbnb site. And what sellers don't typically understand is that you can't sell your Airbnb listing. You can only transfer the entire account, meaning somebody else gets your username and password and then they start using that account itself. And if if you haven't done that, it doesn't matter if you have one booking worth $1 or 100 bookings or 20 bookings or 100K or 200K. At the end of the day, all of those guests are going to have to cancel their existing reservation and rebook with somebody else. And I've done this a lot. There's a very, very high chance that not all of them are going to rebook or they're going to look elsewhere, especially if there seems to be some vacancy in the market. So it can be it's always like a wake up call right during the purchase and sale agreement. And the seller's like, oh, I'm not giving up my Airbnb account. It's like, well, I hate to break it to you. All the marketing you just did about bookings being in place and strong rental history doesn't matter at all. It has zero value. So,
And you said like newer investors or newer owners, right? I've even had experienced property managers not
yeah.
remember this key fact, which is really interesting. It's never
Right.
been transferable. I don't know where the idea came into play. And I think
Yeah.
people fall victim to thinking they have this business, right? In commercial real estate, I have a self storage facility under contract and it has $150,000 a year in net operating income. That is a commercial real estate transaction and a business, right? That business is transferable at the time of sale. We are selling
Yes.
properties, residential homes that happen to be used as great income generators,
Yeah.
right? But there's no intellectual property or business there unless you set it up right. And thus, your home is just a home and the value is the market value, right? So, we're going to show you actually how to
Right.
raise the value of your property if you do go to sell it. You got to be
Yes.
very tactical and strategic up front and plan with the end in mind, right?
Yes. Yes. Totally. And what I'd tell you is now, if you're using a really, really great property manager who does revenue management, is on point with marketing, all of that sort of stuff, and the listing is under that property manager's account, then that could actually be a value add to a potential buyer. A lot of STR buyers, I'd say it's 50-50. Some want to use a property manager, some want to do self-management. Either way, it could be a value add if the property manager is good enough and treats that home as its own business within their business. So we're not going to focus on that too much because that one's pretty black and white. But yeah, when you're self-managing, if you think you're going to ever want to leverage that home to use it in a 1031 exchange or trade up, especially if it's one of your first STRs, and what I'll say as a caveat is our two STRs we heavily use personally these days. Whenever the day comes to sell it, if that comes, I'm just planning on selling it at whatever the house next door sold for. Sure, I can say that there's a rental history, but I'll be very, very clear that it really has no impact on their revenue going forward unless they want my company to manage it. It has no bearing on that. And so, if you're buying a short-term rental, just know those things don't transfer over. And to this date, I've been in the industry for years now. I've actually never seen somebody give up their Airbnb account to transfer in a sale, mainly because they have other houses on it. So please, if you're thinking about ever selling and you're in the process of buying, strongly consider creating a separate Airbnb account for that listing, is what I'd say first. Do the same with VRBO. Create a direct booking site specifically for that one home. Now, that's easy because you can do that down the road. the direct booking isn't tied to necessarily review counts and things like that that are really valuable in Airbnb and VRBO. And don't be scared to put it on a management system so that way this whole technology package can be bundled up and transferred with the home, especially if that buyer might want to buy it using a DSCR loan, a debt service coverage ratio loan in the short-term rental space. If you have the rental history and you have the future rentals on the books that are actually good rentals at good price points, and a third and long if and but statement. Uh, all of these can be packaged up and sold with the home. Then that buyer will be able to find some lenders that can lend based on the income, not necessarily what the next door neighbor's house sold for. But you have to have all of these pieces dialed in as a seller. You really, really do. And it's not a bad idea to get yourself some education maybe a year before you think of selling, to learn how to dial in revenue management and marketing and all the other pieces of this. So you're actually selling an A plus business, an A plus product that is very low risk to a potential buyer.
Yeah, and let's also remember, right? Like we're talking about one of one examples, right? Of somebody with a,
Yeah.
having a DSCR and they have a profit and loss. Like I've never personally seen this. It'd be awesome if this was a common occurrence because DSCR loans, they're really challenging to close, right? Because appraisers don't understand the short-term
Yeah.
rental model or business, right? But at the end of the day, right? Like what people don't typically understand when they're not in the game every single day is DSCR loans. I just closed a commercial loan on a short-term rental yesterday, right? That bank, yes, they're heavily looking at financing, right? The buyer still personally guarantees the note, and the bank's not just going to lend on anything. There's still an appraisal, right? So
Yeah.
while the commercial banks underwrite the properties to make sure the debt coverage service ratio makes sense, right? They still need to make sure the real estate's actually worth what we're saying it's worth. So even
Yeah.
though if you have all this great documentation, your house is still a house, right? It needs to be priced accordingly. And, just because you have short-term rental revenue doesn't mean it's worth $500,000 more. And I always laugh because realtors that don't understand short-term rentals will always say, oh, strong rental history. And I'll always ask about it. It's like they rented it 3 weeks out of the year, right? So every single house, I think, in a second home
Yeah.
market has strong rental history. That's the truth. But this is how you set yourself apart is 1031 exchange, like you said, or somebody looking for a very
Right.
turnkey property. Having that history is definitely a selling point, and although it won't help you net hundreds of thousands more, it'll help sell your house, and that's the truth.
Totally. Totally. And it becomes a value add to the potential buyer, right? That potential buyer now knows that they're buying a business and all the pieces of that business are in place. Two businesses that offer the same service. One has Loctite systems and a great business strategy. The other one has no systems and might be a solopreneur. Guess which business is going to be valued higher, right? The one who has the Loctite systems and is run like an actual business. What it also does is it sets that buyer up for success, right? That buyer really can walk in and have all of these things set up for them. And then if they ever go to sell it, they get to be the beneficiaries of that too. Now, let's say you've been running a home. Let's say you own several short-term rentals and you've been running a house on your own Airbnb account with your other properties and what have you that you own, and you think, next year I might want to sell this property. It's never too late to just break that house off and put it onto its own Airbnb and VRBO account. What you can do it one of two ways. On your existing account, you can block the calendar after the last booking and then create a mirror account and a mirror listing and start accepting bookings after that date on the new listing and the new account altogether. Or you can take a bit of a chance and you can block the calendar after a certain date and you can reach out to guests and say, "Hey, I'm creating a new Airbnb account. um, yeah, I'd love if you felt comfortable enough to cancel your booking and rebook over there. I'll give you a 10% discount." You can get some bookings in that way. At the end of the day, I'd probably go with option one. Just block your calendar after a certain date and start
Right.
taking bookings on that new account. And then that way, when it comes time to sell, right? A lot of people, when it comes time to sell, everything can then just be conveyed. Yeah, it's going to be inconvenient going into multiple Airbnb accounts, but if you use a property management system, all of that should be condensed down into one portal, one dashboard, and it's really not that big of a deal anyway. So, something to strongly think about, especially right now. We're recording this, it's May 23rd. This is an interesting time of year in general in the short-term rental space, mainly because we're right before peak season. It's not uncommon for people to start to peak season being summer. It's not it's not uncommon for folks to start to think, huh, I'm gonna like, if it's a beach house, I'm gonna offload this thing after this summer. Think about that now, right? Or if you have a mountain house near a ski resort like Sunday River, and you start thinking, okay, I think after next winter, I'm going to give this one more run, and then I'm going to offload it about a year, 10 months to a year from now. Create that new Airbnb and VRBO account now. Sure, you might have to try and maneuver some bookings, or you might have to just let those bookings go altogether. But in the end of the day, you'll be able to have a much more appealing product for sale if your intent is to market it as an existing short-term rental.
Yeah, and I'll say two things, right? If you are in a vacation market, right, there is inherent value in this, right? But if you're in a more primary based market, or maybe you do some midterm rental strategy, like, you really just have to pick your lane. Maybe it doesn't make sense to market it as a turnkey short-term rental. Like, there are
Right.
instances where I tell clients of mine, you are causing more pain than you're going to have pleasure on the
Yeah.
other side by having to deal with this. Because, like, I just had an instance of this example, right, where I thought it didn't really make a ton of sense to put out true revenue figures. And you know what? Hey, if somebody's interested in the rental history, here are some great projections, right? Because what
Right.
can happen is buyers and buyer agents that are not educated by the strategies we do in, using tools like STR
Right.
Insights, it confuses people. It confuses, the agents. It confuses the consumer, right? Then lenders try to get involved, and then you don't have an advocate on the other side, right? Short-term rental specific real estate agents are extremely rare, right? Like, I think I might be, one of five in New England, maybe, max,
Yeah.
right? And it's just a very
Right.
specific niche. And a lot of times you have to think, how is the consumer going to understand this information if you're not there to explain it to them? And it can make a huge mess. And I'll tell you, the drama created by short term rental bookings when another party doesn't really understand what the heck's going on, it can blow up transactions. And I've seen it firsthand, um, through like third
Yeah.
party people calling me, other agents asking for help because they don't understand the bookings aren't transferable. The revenue doesn't make sense to them. Their cleaner doesn't want to move over. You got to pick your lane and either execute really highly on it and do it the right way, like Dave's talking about, or just say, hey, it has a strong rental revenue. And you know what? There's great property managers I can put you in touch with. So pick your
Totally.
lane. That's it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'll say, right, is there's two kind of buyers out there. There's the short-term rental investors, right? Like myself, Dave, people in our circles, people watching this, right? And then there's the people that are kind of interested in it and don't really understand it, right? Those are the people that are going to see the most value in these turnkey properties. When my clients that I'm working with, same for you on the Cape, right, are looking and analyzing short-term rentals, they see past rental info, they're like, "Ha, I know I can probably,
Yeah.
10x that," right? And they're just
Yeah.
going to analyze the property on their own. I mean, Bill Faith even says, he's like, "I never look at past revenue. All I care about is, like, hey, do you happen to have past expenses?" Right? Because past
Right.
performance is not an indicator of future success. Mic drop. There
Totally
you
agree.
go.
Totally. Totally agree. I totally agree. And a couple other nuances, just some storytelling now. I was quarterbacking a transaction in Massachusetts here a few weeks ago, a home that we took over on the management front for brand new short-term rental buyers. And I think there was about 70K, 75K in bookings from May through September. And it was a hodgepodge, some on Airbnb, some under the table direct bookings, and they marked
That's
it
my
all
favorite.
over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. An $8,000 booking over 14 days sounds great at first until you realize that didn't include cleaning fee, it didn't include 14% tax. It didn't include a lot of things. And at the end of the day, you get an ADR that's $350 when it should be closer to 1,000. So,
And that's the other
one,
thing that I see too, and I've
yeah,
seen on you sharing with me, like you're taking over management clients, right? And you're like, we can actually rebook all these dates and get you 50% more,
yes,
right?
even
So
this
it's not
close
all
to the
it's cracked
summer.
up to be. Yeah.
Even this close to the summer, right? And so people are going to book like you haven't missed that window. If it's a peak season, people are going to book no matter what. And so what was interesting was, we work for our clients. In this case, the client was the buyer. So I was quarterbacking this transference of bookings and explaining to them no, even though the seller is saying that all these bookings will remain in place, you have to get in writing that you get access to her Airbnb account. At the end of the day, the purchase and sale agreement almost never got signed because the seller didn't realize that. And the seller wasn't willing to give up her Airbnb account. She just was not. And so what we landed on was that, the existing guests could book a time with my team to rebook on our listing. However, these bookings were severely under market value, and they also didn't fall in line to optimize occupancy for the summer. And so a lot of those guests were really upset. Now we started this process before the close of the sale, and I did. My team, anyways, had to say to a lot of these guests, "You're going to have to go back to the person selling the property that you booked with. Like, we're sorry, but at the end of the day, it's the seller that decided to sell the home, and they did not have adequate knowledge on the best ways to maximize the situation, maximize the sale, or even sell it as an STR. So, whenever you're selling a home that's a short-term rental, if it's going to be sort of a last minute decision, it's really on you to make sure you get with the guests. And it's not the buyer's fault if you feel bad that these people are going to lose out on a vacation. At the end of the day, you're in control. You're the one that decided to sell the home, and you have to take responsibility for that. And if a buyer doesn't want to keep any of those reservations, they don't have to. They're not the one that decided to sell the home. You are. So make sure that you really own that too, because I see a lot of times sellers really just want like the quickest way out of this situation so they can benefit from the gain of the sale and not have to deal with the mess that they've created in all of these existing bookings. And we put that right back onto the seller. And that's why I love working with clients when they're in the process of buying the home or on the front end, right? Because when you meet a client right when they get pre-approved before a purchase has been made, you can walk them through all of these steps so they're much more informed than somebody going at this blind. So
Right. Yeah. And people get burned a lot, right? Maybe showing 2022 revenue versus 23 or 24, right? Like we see it all. And like you said, I love that you said that. The seller has to own it. And like, yeah, it's uncomfortable and it stinks. But a lot of times I see sellers like, well, I'd love to push closing out just so this person can do this, or can we put a restriction in there that this, you know what? At the end of the day, that is where transactions get messy, and that's where things blow up. And we're looking to sell real estate, not have to sell a house 3 times because of that.
yeah.
The other thing that I'll say is make sure whoever you're working with, if you want to sell the property, maybe they're a short-term rental specific agent, make sure they have a marketing plan for residential homes as well, right? I call myself
Yeah.
I'm a hybrid, right? I have a pretty good residential business and then I do a lot of short-term rentals, right? It's probably split 50-50, right? Make sure that person, whether it's Dave, wherever you are in the country, make sure they have a marketing plan for regular buyers as well. Because what I see is like when a commercial agent tries to sell a multifamily under 4 units, like they just don't really understand it, right? They need to talk like a regular person, not a commercial banker, broker. Make sure they can also market the home as a residential home because right now, with it being such a strong seller's market in a lot of these places, I just sold a beach house in Scarborough for somebody who watches these quite frequently. So hello,
Oh,
and the buyer
cool.
was a residential buyer, right? So we made the decision to actually cancel all bookings because I had the feeling that the highest and best use for this house is actually a residential buyer who's going to pay top dollar because in my opinion where the value was didn't make sense as an investment property anymore, right? It did when he bought it, not where today's market is, which is awesome because he had a lot of equity and he can go purchase something else. But figure out the highest and best use for the property. And going through this process, maybe you'll figure out it's actually not for short-term rental. If that buyer's out there, hey, it has a rental history, that's awesome. Here's an attachment on MLS. And if it doesn't, John and Jane Doe can buy it as their, home with the kid and
Right.
the dog, right? And you just want to maximize your bottom dollar. So many people get so hyper focused on rental, 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 and they forget these are residential homes and there is a housing shortage in America.
Right. 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 Although I will say some of these multi-million dollar STRs that we're selling, I don't know.
Right.
Jury's out on if someone local is just gonna, oh, I'm going from apartment to $2 million chalet. But generally speaking, I totally agree with you. It is
100%.
funny. I'll leave that discussion for a whole nother day of the funny things we see in some of these Facebook groups. Um, well,
Always fun.
Will, just before we wrap this up, I want to do a little local business shout out. I want to support somebody's business, somebody that you and I both know. My lady, Deb Stover in the Sunday River Market, is really expanding her reach for property launches and staging as short term rentals, taking inventory of things in the home, making sure everything is fully stocked, doing all the staging ahead of photos, all that sort of stuff. She's been nailing it for me in that market, and I know that she's been slowing down the number of clients she's taking on the cleaning side and really expanding this side of her business. And she's been doing really great with that. So I wanted to give her a big shout out because she's crushing it. It's super fun. She's super, super reliable. And I know that a lot of owners in the Sunday River Market don't live local to there. So if you want contact information for her, give Will or I a shout. We're happy to connect you. Um, with that, Mr. Will, how can folks find you?
Yeah, super easy. WillVanWickler.com. You can book a call with me, reach out. Happy to help you, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And if you want to buy in Massachusetts or sell in Massachusetts, I won't hold it against you, but you can reach out to Dave for that. But happy to help out in all those states. And what I'll say is about Deb, the biggest thing that I see is like, oh, the photographer forgot to turn the light on this and that. They didn't fluff the pillows. That's not their job. They're there to take
Right,
photos. So just, yeah, I'd say do the right thing and hire like somebody like Deb, whether it's at Sunday River with connections in all the markets we serve. But that's the number
right,
one pain point I hear is, hey, the light wasn't on, this didn't look that way. That's not what a
right,
photographer does, right? So the
right.
stager is such a key element in a successful short-term rental launch. But I'll stop talking. If somebody
Totally.
wants help selling, buying, consulting, co-hosting, I don't know, public
Yeah.
speaking now, coaching, I mean, what don't you do?
If there's a problem, I got a solution to fix it. We'll put it that way. So if
That's
you got a
right.
problem with anything, hit up davemenapace.com. You can find all my links, businesses, things like that right from davemenapace.com. So check it out. Would love to connect with folks. You can book a time right on my calendar from there. And with that, just want to thank everyone for listening, and happy hosting.
See you guys.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Hassle Free RE. We hope you found today's tips and stories as inspiring and useful as I did. Remember, success in the short-term rental industry is all about learning, adapting, and staying one step ahead. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review or comment on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Plus, we'd love to hear your thoughts and any topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And follow us at Hassle-Free RE on social media for more tips and updates. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep it hassle-free.